Alex, Ukraine Crisis Media Center continues its work, and now we'll speak about the children of war and children of war consequence of results of military aggression to Ukraine. And I invite the honorable speakers to take the floor. Good morning. My Oleg Zarubynskyy. I run Ukrainian Institute of Extremist Studies. Today it's the first decade of June is over. Why do I speak? I'm talking about this because today is international days during this decade, and if we got used to international children's protection of children, then the second day on the 4th of June, it's a day of innocent children, victims of war, and this year it became for our country extremely important. And yes, from the war on Donbass, as the UN says, 5 million people suffered. According to UNICEF, 1,700,000 children, and that is 34% from general number. According to International Organization of Healthcare, 68 children died, and 4 during the last ceasefire. 176, according to data also, that is a reference organization, they became victims of the wounded. In addition to that, not always we mentioned that about the consequence of war in Ukraine and Donbass. Also, children of many other countries became victims, and shot down MH17, which was shot down by militants, separatists. There were 68 children from different countries, and they also died. A big category of children because of this aggression, those the children of IDPs, and on the 3rd of June, that's the last official position. On 2015, the Ministry of Social Policy, they registered 1,325,154 IDPs. It doesn't mean that 3% of the whole population of Ukraine. And we don't calculate Crimea and Sevastopol. And according to the state data of the state emergency service, and on the same date, and they moved 873,000 people, and the majority of them are from Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and 853,000 from Crimea, so 20,662. So, in average, almost in the line, almost 2,000 children, people of Ukraine, every day leave their houses, and since at the beginning of Russian aggression, and they continue that, and that is just we speak about IDPs, and we speak about who moved to Ukraine, 150,000 of them. One 481 children, 17.2% from all IDPs. What does it mean? It means that, in average, 330 people left their houses every day. Dear ladies and gentlemen, because this is a big problem related to children of Institute of Extremism Studies, and we made a research on children and childhood in Ukraine out of decision of military aggression, but because of very short format of our meeting, all materials and all results of our recommendations, you could find it on our website, and the positions, you will get those materials in the end of our meeting. And now we present only very briefly. In addition to what we do with research at children of IDPs and the security of children in ATO and children temporary occupied territory. Also, special attention to formation of new generation and the conditions of war. It's clear that now children are war, and it's not like before, like older generation. That's that generation which gets socialized under conditions of war. They began against Ukraine, and it's that has influence on potential models of behavior of those children who tomorrow. And we want them to return to free territory of Donbass, where they lived, and it's very important for us. And it's our recommendation that those children, that generation, should be leaders should promote Ukrainian ideas on Donbass, and those children should become an important factor of integration of Donbass in Ukraine. I speak about occupied territories. During the last 15 months, in a sense of patriotic education of children and students, in a sense of formation of values of patriotism. A lot was done by Ministry of Education. We can speak about that, but because of a short time, I will not speak about that. I will put that in our research. You can see that. And I will say only one thing. In our opinion, and the importance of overcoming such show off and simplification of values of patriotism in methodical recommendations to patriotic upbringing of children and schoolboys and school children. In the recommendations, they say it's important not to replace with external phenomena of patriotism. It's a deep essence and with creative, scientific, sport achievements with the service and of defending of Ukraine to promote Ukrainian state, development of Ukrainian state. One more comment in this context. In Russia, ideology or concept of formation of patriotic model of behavior, it says the patriotism is first of all a service to the state. In Ukrainian concept, it says it's promotion of the development of the state. If you go deep, it's very, very good, very interesting. Service to the state and promotion of the state in Ukrainian concept. And we believe that we are in the framework of European stream.
Any military actions are accompanied by IDPs. Please show the next slide. You see that the problem of influence of IDPs on the local communities is very serious. One of the problems is today the expenditures of the healthcare are allocated based on the number of population in a special area. The money for the infrastructure of public health and education now have a big burden because of this inflow of IDPs. The issues related to the material support to life stories are now of priority. We have research that in top 10 information resources, how many times the problem of IDPs was mentioned. Only 7% of this is about the problems of children. I believe that's because of the not understanding of the situation. 4% is just quite interesting. It's on violations of the IDPs, which contradicts the fact there are rumors that they are mostly the subjects of violations and crimes. We provide recommendations saying that the state has to do everything to avoid some language of hostilities in relation to IDPs, especially if this is stated by some high civil servants, because that ruins the relations between local population and IDPs. You see here quite interesting statistical data. In the left column, the numbers in percentage of the educational institutions which are on the controlled by Ukraine territory of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. To the right, you see the educational institutions, and there are more than 50% of them which are under separatists. Why I am emphasizing that? Because most part of IDPs are now residing on the liberated areas of Lugansk and Donetsk region, and but the infrastructure, talking about the educational infrastructure and public health infrastructure, are quite limited. So the issue of targeted subventions is psychologically and formally very important, because that burden which falls on the local budgets produces deterioration of conditions of providing educational and health services for local population and IDPs, and also very important, it has risks of deteriorating relations and tension between local population and IDPs. I will finish on that, and I would like to mention one thing again. The attitude to children of war, to children of IDPs and other categories of children in Ukraine is not just investment into tomorrow. This is forming the generation that we would like to be the generation of democratic values and Ukrainian values and interests. Good morning. In my part of the presentation, I will tell about the problems of children. Please introduce yourself. Bogdan Petrenko, Deputy Director of the Institute. In my part of the presentation, I will tell about the problems of childhood in the regions of military actions. You've heard about the numbers of the killed and wounded children. I believe that the main task of the state is not to allow increase of these numbers, and those children who are in the pre-front zone. The only possible option to resolve that problem is to evacuate them. So we have identified some basic problems which we unite by the general term, the echo of war. First, the next slide. First, that is the armaments and mines. All over Ukraine, the number of those who suffered from non-sanctioned treatment of armaments and mines, the number of children who suffered is 11. We're talking about preventive methods, about methodological materials for children, and practical actions on demining the territories. Second is overcoming the psychological stress with children from military actions. Third is the attitude to people with weapons. We understand that the attitude to the state and law enforcement structures is mutually dependent. And the task of the state is that children are to have positive attitude to Ukrainian military. Also the infrastructure which has been ruined, only talking about medical institutions, the losses caused us 76 million hryvnias. As to children that reside in occupation, it's difficult even to say how many of them are there in Crimea. As of the 1st of January last year, there were about 450,000 children in Donbass. We observe high migration processes. As to the children in occupation, they have same problems as the children in the ATO zone. Ukraine as the state has no possibility to resolve the problems there. And the second specific feature is that Ukrainian propaganda forms creates the hostile to Ukraine culture. So reintegration of these regions, reintegration of children into cultural space of Ukraine will be very complicated process, but even before liberation, Ukraine as the state has an opportunity to involve talented children to study in Ukrainian universities. But that creates another problem, the problem of the difficulty of getting documents by children to enter Ukrainian universities. We calculated the child has to cross the border 6 times. In Donbass, that is the front line, in fact, in order to get all the necessary documents to enter the university. So one of our proposals is to introduce the general testing of graduates from schools which are on occupied territories, which on the one hand could become the exam to get a school certificate that could be used as the certificate of external exam. Actually, the war of graduates, for graduates, is another element of hybrid war, the war for brains. Unfortunately, last year, Ukraine practically was losing in this war. 1,400 children from Crimea entered the universities in Russian Federation, and only 300 were passing exams on the Ukrainian territory. The Russian analog of 1,040 graduates have registered to take exam in Russia, and only 65 to take exam in the territory of Ukraine. These figures are not final. Russia establishes quotas in the universities, and in Ukraine we will have 2 more sessions of external exams, so these figures are not final. But of those who decided where they will enter, only 6% elect Ukraine. But we have the problem with issuing certificates for newly born, for children who reach the age of 16. So we should not allow any signs of humanitarian siege on the occupied territories. In our research, we came to the conclusion that the problem of children of war cannot be resolved separately from the general problems of the state and war. In 15 months that passed from the beginning of Russian aggression in Ukraine, we have not developed the strategy of restoring the territorial integrity and adaptation of IDPs. We have not set up the body which would be responsible for its implementation. The state has implemented several things, but because there's no system, they face the lack of reflection in other spheres. Introducing by educators of critical mentality is what needs to be done. The opportunities existing for the graduates from the zone of occupation, well, they see many obstacles, the transportation, communication, for example. The state has to create conditions, not just to improve the conditions of living of children, but so that they understand, irrespective of where they live, the state takes care of them. And this is all shortly. In detail, you can see our research on our website. Thank you.
Good morning. Mykola, Kuleba, authorized by the President on issues of children. I would like to thank you for such deep research, deep study for the statistics we have in your report, in your study, because it's very difficult today from we receive different information from different sources. Thank you for bringing all those things together, and you identify the main issues. And in my opinion, we have with which children face, children who live on occupied and liberated territories. But I would like to add. You mentioned the load on infrastructure. I want to say they agree with that, but I state that we need to urgently solve the issue of functioning social workers, because I personally very often visit and buffer zone and other settlements, certain towns in Luhansk and Donetsk regions. They are overloaded with IDPs, and unfortunately, we have such of them. We don't have social workers. We have no one to work there, and of course, we can rely on volunteers. And I would like to thank those volunteers who are there and those organizations who train psychologists and who involve them and who pay for their services. But I believe that the state and state institutions that must work, they're not provided with a necessary amount of social workers who must provide those services. Because I personally saw how many children are there who suffered because of thousands of people, children need that assistance. One more issue: manipulation with children. We see that on occupied territories, and on the territory, on our territory, we have Russian media, and we see how they influence on their mentality. It's very difficult to work, even if we have them. It's very difficult to reach those people, because people are just and also illegal transportation of children to Russian Federation. We cannot control that, and 5,000 children without parents are on occupied territories, and we don't know what is happening to those children. And but there is one more problem: that institutions from which they move children during occupation, those who don't have parents, they again there. We don't know who from those children are coming back, and who decides on their status, because our government does not control the process. So there is no control there, and it can bring to the growth of children without as to good conditions. In the office, we receive complaints from families that they are looking for good conditions for living. So that's why I would like I ask heads of administrations and from those on whom it depends, and that issue. I understand that this is very complicated to solve, because I personally was recently in several regions, and of course there are complaints of IDPs that the state doesn't provide housing for them, but there were some other categories of people who also are in lines for many years, and they wanted to get the housing, and that can bring to serious attention. So we need the work of social workers for them to explain to our citizens how it works. But in my opinion, of course, as a phenomenon, we speak about them as about a phenomenon, about IDPs, but there is a big danger in that. If we create special conditions for IDP children, then they can be discriminated. because there will be certain attitude to them. And in my opinion, the state must provide the level for every child, whether they are IDPs or not IDPs, but there should be decent level of supporting their rights. We can speak about the job for parents, because that allows her to adapt to the society quick. And the last point, in the parliament, they prepared the draft law 2254-24. One of the component of it is children in military conflicts, and I invite MPs to bring this draft law as soon as possible to the vote and to vote for it. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, is there any question? Center of Information, Human Rights, and I have a question to Mykola. Now, military activities intensify, and there is no evacuation of 150 children from those areas. Who, in your opinion, should take them out? Ministries or administration? There should be the work of cooperation with the penitentiary service and the Ministry of Interior, and they should coordinate that activity. But again, many times we spoke to the Prime Minister on that they should identify that area of the conflict, at least 100 kilometers from which they must evacuate not only those institutions that you mentioned, but also others, at least where you have children without their parents, and the state is responsible for them according to the Constitution. Dear colleagues, our topic was research, so I ask if there is any question to the research, please ask those questions. Borna Kostyuk, Radio Liberty. To Mr. Zarubynskyy, I have a question. In your study, do you consider the issue of the situation about children whose parents died during 80, or because as a volunteer, I can tell you that those children need a lot of psychological support? My answer is very short. Yes, we didn't speak about that, but that's a special part, and you can find that information on our website. That's a serious issue, and this is an issue of justice as to those people who are sent by the state to the war. It's justice to their families. And I would like to add that there are programs even in the presidential administration, and those children will receive recreation opportunity. Tell me, please, you said that 5,000 people are still in the 80O area, and are those children, do they live in families or in some institutions? So where do they live? How many children, orphans, those children who in two institutions in Luhansk region, the children were not evacuated, and those disabled children, and 106 children, and I spoke about 5,000. It's 4,000 people, and about 500 in boarding schools, family boarding schools, and also adopted by families. Almost 15,000 children were on Luhansk and Donetsk regions, and 2/3 lived where the territory is occupied now. But 1/3 came, and but 1/3 is moved to Ukraine. A question to Bogdan. Petrenko, you gave statistics of those who got registered for Ukrainian external exams from Crimea, and in general, 1,100 in general. Is it a few? For Ukrainian external exam, 1,040 signed up, but in Kherson, 65 in Kherson. There's a lot of those who graduate from high schools. Russia allows them not to have exams at all, and Russian universities give 2%, 3% of seats for students from Crimea. Russia pumping out the best and the most talented students, and they continue Soviet practice. And there are people who remember that under Soviets, at the time when through Ukraine, when all the exams started on August 1st, and to Moscow, the most privileged universities after Lomonosov, Bauma, Skol, Gimo, etc., they, on purpose, exams started on July 1st. They took the best, and then, if they have not entered, they could also pass exams in Ukraine. So now Russia helps that. Well, what? To arise the interest that they will, of course, they take the most skilled, talented, and this is a serious issue for Ukraine, not only education, but also for Ukraine internal policy. One more question. Ukraine from. I have a question to Mykola. Recently, the head of Dnipropetrovsk State Administration suggested to introduce changes to the law on recreation of children for children of IDPs from Crimea, from Donbass, and could recreate free of charge. Do you support such an initiative? And in your opinion, what else the state can do? Maybe. What kind of else privileges could be provided to such category of children? There are several draft laws and that about such children to put them into the privileged category. But even now, the Ministry of Social Policy gave 20,000 seats for children IDPs. So the problem is partially resolved, and we need to change the legislation for that category to be. But what is the most important? There should be money in the budget for these children. We can. There could be recreation. Could be not only in the summer but also in winter, and so we should have. We should provide amendments to our budget. Thank you. I would like to thank our speakers for the presentation of the research. Thank you. I would like to this. It will be on the website, and also we will put it on our website. And I will be thankful if you will translate that research to English, because we have a lot of media, mass media, big pool of mass media from